Okay, Chair, we're now streaming live on YouTube. I'll hand the meeting over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Personnel Committee on the 22nd of March 2022. I'm your chair, Councillor Ian Thomas. I'd also like to welcome viewers to our live stream on the Council YouTube channel. Could I remind everyone that due to concerns relating to COVID risk, our council's delegated much of its decision-making power to our senior officers for the period to the 11th of May 2022. Consequently, this morning will be a consultative meeting only. However, we will work as closely as possible to normal procedural rules as detailed in our constitution. Our member code of conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to disconnect any participant who's disrupting the meeting by whatever means. In the event of a failure in their internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. Should we not be successful within 15 minutes, we'll consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to speak, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. We'll now start the meeting by doing a roll call, please. Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Councillor Allen.
I'm here, Amanda.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Bickley.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Blakey. Councillor De Sarum.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Hall.
Present, Amanda.
Councillor Hayward. Councillor Lawrence.
Present, thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Loudon.
Present, Amanda, thanks.
Councillor Hookway.
Present, thank you.
And Councillor Pepper.
Thank
you,
you.
Chair. I can confirm your quorum today.
Thank you very much.
I think I've been missed.
Sorry, Councillor Cahill, Fred, I must admit I didn't hear your name, but you are on the list. So, Amanda, could we check that, please, and confirm that?
Yeah, Councillor Cahill, I do apologise.
Cahill
Yes,
here.
I can see that you're present. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll vouch for that, Fred, don't worry. Agenda item 1, public speaking. I don't have any members of the public registered to speak. Is that still correct, Amanda?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone's got concerns relating to the minutes, could you please raise your electronic hand? Otherwise, I'll assume we're content to accept these minutes. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor Paul Miller, Councillor Vicky Johns and Councillor Kevin Blakey. Do we have any other apologies there, please, Amanda?
I have no further apologies, no, Chair.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 4, declarations of interest. I will start this off as I have an interest in agenda item that we're covering in part B. Just to confirm, I was interviewed by the East of England LGA team in connection with this item, and I'm advised that doesn't affect my role in dealing with the meeting this morning. Thank you. Are there anybody else with any declarations, please? Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll declare 2 personal interests. The first is the same as the one you've just given. Plus, I was one of those who commissioned the report. And secondly, personal interest because I'm a pensioner with Unison, who represent staff in this council.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was spoken with by the East of England LGA people as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Rowland, I keep seeing your a thumbs up and different things happening. Are you wanting to say anything at this point? No? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just seeing little yellow things appearing on the screen.
Oh, I haven't pressed anything, Ian, so it must be.
It's the Phantom Brentford goal, clearly.
Yeah, VAR.
Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. I've got no matters of urgency for this morning. Confidential or exempt items. Well, it says there are no confidential exempt items here, but actually we do have one, which I'm sure it reflects, it should correctly be noted that there is an item being taken under Part B relating to the learning review. So anyway, I note that at agenda item 6. Sorry, Councillor Desarum, I've got a...
Sorry, yes, Chair. Sorry to I didn't wish to cut across you. Could I seek clarification on why that went to Part B? I appreciate that it says because it's information relating to any individual, and I wondered whether we could have had maybe a redacted part of the report brought forward to us. I appreciate the need for sensitivity, etc. But I wonder, given the fact that we want to get as many people involved as possible in this, in terms of the public viewers, etc. And I'm wondering if there is any way we could have perhaps redacted it to make it more public friendly. But that's just a comment I wish to make, but thank you for your guidance, Chair.
No, don't worry. That's Henry. Would you like to comment at this point, or what? Or are you happy just to leave it as stood, that the reason is actually as presented?
The reason is as presented, and I note that Councillor Desarum simply wanted to make the point, I think, rather than actually asking for an answer from judging by what he...
Well, fair enough. Okay, if Councillor Desarum's happy with that, then we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Chris. Agenda item 7 is the staff HSE survey to be introduced by the Chief Executive, I understand. Mark, over to you. You are muted, Mark.
Well done, thank you. Just a word of potential warning. I am waiting on a call back from my GP. So if I take a call and go on radio silence, that's why. Just so you know. So in terms of this report, this is a sort of a second report detailing for you the results of our second HSE survey, which we undertook as set out in the report. There's a lot of detail in it, and as ever, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have. But I guess for me, the nub of the report is contained in paragraphs 1.2 on page 4, and then also paragraph 3.4 in the conclusion section. So in terms of just taking you to paragraph 1.2, there's an acknowledgement there, I think, that a lot of work has been done, both by councillors and officers since this matter was first taken to the scrutiny committee some time ago. And I think from my perspective as head of paid service and chief executive, that's obviously reassuring and an important thing to note, really. Having said that, set against it, you'll see a number of factors which I've highlighted because, I don't want to over dramatize this, but I mean, what, 38 years of work now? I'm struggling to remember a more disappointing time, in terms of the external environment fundamentally, but also to a degree, some factors in the internal environment. But I think, we have to acknowledge, we have to accept that that has an impact on the organisation and does have an impact on staff. I think also that, there is a sense of not exhaustion, that wouldn't be fair, tiredness, I think, on the part of staff in terms of all the work that's been done over the last 2 years during the pandemic and during lockdown, and that needs to be acknowledged. And I think generally, if I were to sort of give you a sort of a pithy summary of the organisation, it's sort of running on reserve at the moment. I think it needs some gentle coaxing, to get as much mileage out of the organisation whilst we're running on reserve, if you like. So I think we need to be mindful of that in terms of what this survey is saying and the things we're highlighting in terms of going forward, really. So if I take you then to paragraph 3.4, which is my sort of summary paragraph, if you like, I think there are 3 things that are important to progress and complete to sort of help address the issues that the survey reveals. We are reviewing our work smart policy. So that's sort of, how we work, if you like. We are reviewing, or there is an independent reward review underway, and I guess that's sort of why we work, isn't it? So that's an important thing that needs to be completed too and brought back to the committee. And then finally, I've made reference to our IIP accreditation, because we are sort of about 11 months out from when we would formally have a reaccreditation. It's not an investigation, but a reaccreditation exercise, and a lot of work would be undertaken between now and February next year in the lead up to that. And it's certainly my professional recommendation that we want to renew our IIP accreditation. And I think I'm looking to the committee today to sort of give that endorsement for us to proceed with that piece of work. Not totally confident at this stage, at least, that we would necessarily come out as platinum, but I do think we would do well. I think there is a good story to tell in terms of what the council has done over the last year, particularly, and in that respect, I'm thinking about the fact that we have adopted a council plan. We've adopted a robust budget strategy for the next year or two. And also, particularly bearing in mind how much this is of interest to the public, we're well underway, if you like, in terms of the preparations and the early debate on a new local plan. So, from my perspective, there are three key sort of policy strategy documents that the administration has mastered, and it does set a good work programme for going forward. And I think the IIP accreditation, as part of that, is a way of saying, look, this is how the staff can contribute overall to the achievement of those sort of council plan objectives, really. So happy to answer any questions you may have, but essentially that's my report. You've got the recommendations set out, but as I would add to that a request for confirmation from the committee that IIP reaccreditation is something that you wish to endorse, and then myself and Joe, the corporate HR manager, can take that forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. I've got Councillor Allen. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I just draw everyone's attention to the origins of this approach in 1.1 on page 4, which was that we needed to not only have a survey, but also a number of issues about workload, staffing, home working, staff isolation, member contact, and staff communications. So I propose that there should be a report back to scrutiny, which is the origin of this particular requirement on the Personnel Committee, in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just as an aside, Councillor Allen, I think obviously the Personnel Committee reports straight through to full council, as you'll be aware. So what the approach there are two alternatives in this, that either a minute of this committee could be called at full council, or alternatively, as we all know, that scrutiny has a right to look into any item it feels it wishes to. So hopefully that covers off your requirements there. Councillor Lawrence. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to Mark's point about the IIP appraisal, the platinum feature, if you remember, we discussed this at a previous meeting, and I was very much in favour of keeping this going on the basis that if we don't portray the best image, we can't expect to employ the best people. And it does give an added attraction to the council for people who are looking for a new job. So I would like to propose that we carry on with that IIP appraisal, as Mark has outlined, and hopefully get platinum again. And get better people, or not better people, get the best people working on the council.
Thank you, Richard. What I'd do first, before I go to Chief Exec, is ask, could I have a seconder for that proposal, please?
Happy to second it, Chair. Councillor Durham.
Oh, okay, Councillor De Sarum, I'll note you down as seconding there, if we could, please. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment, particularly to the item on investors in people at this point, or shall we go carry on with the substantive bit? Councillor Loudon, do you want to speak on the IAP?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you. And I need to be a bit more fleet of foot, I think, with Bruce around because he beat me to it, and I concur with what Councillor Lawrence said about IIP. I wonder, am I right in thinking, and this is directed to the Chief Executive, that the representatives of the staff are comfortable with progressing with IIP accreditation? Because I think this is something that quite often they feel is a useful way of testing the way in which staff feel about the organisation.
Sorry, with your permission, Chair.
Without question.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, I did, as part of the preparation of this report, engage with Unison just to ask their opinion. Maybe not as fulsome as I might have liked in terms of their support for it, but there is an acknowledgement that it's, it is a definite thing that staff appreciate, and it's a definite thing that staff acknowledge in terms of, the employer, the council, making a full-on commitment, if you like, to want to operate to the highest and the best standards. So that's certainly acknowledged. I just wanted to come back to Councillor Allen, if that's possible as well.
Certainly, no problem.
So just in response to Councillor Allen, as ever, I'm happy to go anywhere really in terms of a report to whichever committee. But I think for me, timing would be key in terms of consideration around when a further report is brought. Because if you look, for example, in paragraph 1.1 in the 4 bullet points, so the 4th bullet point has 4 items, and in a way, I guess, workload, staffing shortages, vacancies, and management support for staff. That is underway, very much so, in terms of the Work Smart review. The budget, which obviously comes into effect, next month, has identified additional resources for some of the staffing shortages. We've got the issue of the reward review in terms of making sure that we're confident we're offering the right salaries when we go out to advert, and management supports for staff, if you like, is part and parcel of the IIP process. So number 2, homework in staff isolation very much comes into the Work Smart review. Member conduct with staff. I mean, I think I'm giving you quite a reasonable degree of reassurance with regard to that matter in this report, albeit you may want to come back to that later on in this meeting. And staff communications, although I haven't highlighted it in this report, the survey that we did include additional questions around the issue of staff communications, and they're being analysed by Joe, and we will be bringing reports in due course. Sorry, that's just set my dog off. Whoever's dog that has just set my dog off.
I do apologise. My dog is doing well.
Okay, and we so with staff communications, we can certainly give an update, be it to scrutiny or this committee, around the extra work that's being done with regard to that.
Thank you for that, Mark. Councillor Desarum.
Chair, since I've been named and on this issue,
there isn't actually right to reply, Mike, but I will come back to you. But I've got Bruce to speak next.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to. I was looking at 3.4 of the report, as we were just talked about. Happy Healthy Here programme. Would it be possible to get a report back to a meeting on that one? How is that progressing? Because it said it's being reviewed and we're placing increased emphasis on the programme, and maybe we could have a very brief report on that to see whether actually it has addressed the concerns that were raised. So I wonder if that's something the committee might like to look at. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do just firstly is there anybody else wanting to speak on the IIP matter? Councillor Allen, are you wanting to speak on that, or are you wanting to speak on something else?
I fully support IIP. In fact, I used to be very much concerned with it at the Learning and Skills Council. But no, I just wanted to point out that one 1.1 fifth point, that I do welcome what the Chief Executive is committed to bring a report back to scrutiny, because that was what scrutiny requested. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ranger, Val.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so just to say, so I'm supportive of the investors in people. I just concerned, though, having been through them myself, you know, of the workload involved at a time when people are still saying that they do feel under stress, you know, that we're a bit understaffed in certain departments. So that's whether there's any flexibility on our timing for that is my concern. So we know where people have said they're doing more for less, they're feeling they haven't got options sometimes. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the additional workload on staff who are working towards investors in people, which we know is hugely time consuming.
Thank you very much. Mark, would you like to just respond to that at this point?
Yeah, so I certainly understand what Councillor Ranger has mentioned. I think for us, though, in one sense, it's like you know, putting the car into the garage for a service, in the sense that, you know, we are a high performing organisation, so it's not as if we were starting from afresh. It's a bit of, you know, retuning, if you like. And I think I would also say that in difficult times, you know, the obligation for good management, which is, you know, related intimately to IIP, is even more so, if you like, rather than in times when you know, organisations might feel that they can sort of coast along, really.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, is this in relation to the IIP matter or something else? It is. Okay. Would you like to speak now then, please?
Yeah, it's just a quick one, really. It's the comment that Mark made earlier about he was unsure whether we would reach platinum, and I don't know whether he's able to sort of expand on that at this point, or whether it's something he'd rather not discuss until we've got to that stage, sort of thing. It's a bit chicken and eggy, really. So it's just a question. I was just intrigued. Is it because of COVID, for example, or other reasons? Thank you.
Mark.
I'm just hedging my bets professionally, really. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Do you want our renewed platinum to be a great surprise for celebration? Is that what you're saying? Anyway, can I just quickly, I won't say put to bed, can I just quickly get a straw poll? Are we comfortable to add the recommendation as proposed by Councillor Lawrence and seconded by Councillor Desaram, that we endorse the IIP move forward? Is anybody, any objections to that, or can I take that as being supported? In the absence of objections, I take that as being supported, and that's now will be added to the draft recommendations for this morning. So what I'd like to do now is go back to the report in general, and if anybody would like to speak on that. I do recall Councillor Hall actually had his hand up at one point. I'm not sure whether that's, you'd like to continue with that, Ian? Ian, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can't actually hear you, Ian, I'm afraid.
No. Oh dear.
I can now.
Internet connection. You can. I'll leave my camera off. I will leave my camera off to save your eyes. Good morning to everybody. It's a beautiful day. I'm fortunate that I have a team of up to 72 members of staff in my day paid job. And over the last 2 years, the day-to-day problems, what we would call them, have been kind of like buried. And I've noticed, and I don't know if it resonates across the East Devon Council, but I'd be surprised if it didn't, that all the other issues are kind of like starting to simmer to the surface. And with that, it's been quite a lot of anxiety. There's no doubt about it with what Mark was saying. It has been a difficult and challenging times, especially because a lot of the areas have been suppressed because of the pandemic. But going into the actual finer details of the actual survey itself, and I am, as we know, and I will always be consistent, is what we as councillors, the elected councillors, can do here. When I actually looked at the survey itself, on page 22 on the left-hand side, but page 15 on the bottom, was regarding comments on there. Even though they were a few, I take these very, very seriously. Bullying and harassment behaviours of councillors. Councillors did not take the results of last year's survey seriously. We need an apology for the way we we're treated as staff. So there's one point. And the second one is I don't have time to improve what I do, plan for the future. I am just firefighting. Now that, to my mind, is somebody who is really crying out for help. So on those 2 points for you, Chair, may Mark be able to respond to both them, please?
Thank you, Ian. Mark, would you like to respond to your perception of those elements of the report, please?
Yeah. So I have touched on in the narrative of my report a sense that I think, generally speaking, staff do acknowledge the improvements that have been made. They do acknowledge how things have improved, but there is a degree of caution, perhaps, around fully embracing this is how we're confidently go forward, because it looks like you say, really, it has been a very, very difficult time over the last couple of years for various reasons. So I think I would see it with regard to that. And certainly, I don't have time to improve what I do, plan for the future. I'm just firefighting. Again, I think that is what, I really took those to heart. And that's why, we did bring forward in the budget the additional resources for street scene, environmental health and planning, because those comments, you can, sort of relate them back particularly to those 3 service areas. So, yeah, I mean, all the comments that have been made, have been assessed and sort of understood, if you like. And I think you need to look to other actions that the council has taken as part of the process we've been going through with the adoption of the council plan and then the adoption of the budget, to sort of say, yes, there is a recognition with regard to those issues, really.
Thank you for the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was very helpful. Councillor Loudon, John.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the content that Mark has shared with us in terms of the detail of the staff survey. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, a staff survey is important, and it's an important snapshot at a particular time. The one difficulty of a staff survey is that it's not always able to quite capture the nuancing that there is when one's in employment. But what it clearly does do is identify, if you like, the 2 extremes often of staff's thoughts, and that is those where staff are feeling concerned about issues, quite rightly, and the opposite end where staff equally feel pretty positive. It's usually, as in life, that those in the middle that don't get captured. I say all of that, and it's not any way to denigrate the outcome of the staff survey, but reading it, what it seems to do, and I think in some ways I follow on from what Councillor Hall was saying, that this is now starting to get back to business as normal approach. And what I'm seeing here in this staff survey, and I look to the Chief Executive to tell me I'm misinterpreting, what I'm seeing here is that staff in the main are voicing the usual sorts of issues that one sees coming out of staff surveys, where employees flag up to the employer things like resources, usually the lack of. Most staff don't say, whoopee, we've got too many staff. Secondly, the working environment, and Mark has talked about the broader working environment, particularly, as we all know, the last 2 years, and we all recognise how all staff have stepped up to the plate over the last 2 years, more than ever. And then thirdly, the issue of customers, if you like, because we deliver to customers, and I don't mean that phrase derogatorily. It's another way of talking about residents, isn't it? So when we're dealing with an outcome like this, it's also important for managers such as Mark and his colleagues to also engage regularly with staff, as they will do. And I believe that the Chief Executive has been out and about of late, engaging with his staff teams. And I wondered if Mark is able to perhaps give us a more up-to-date feel for what he's gathered from talking directly to the groups of staff, in addition to what he's got here as a set of guidance of concerns from staff.
Thank you, John. Would you like to add anything at this point, Mark, in response?
Well, I think you might be a bit too cynical in terms of interpreting the staff survey as business as usual. I mean, I think you heard from Jo Fellows at an earlier meeting of the Personnel Committee that, you know, when she joined the organisation, she had done an analysis of the different surveys that we've done over time to get a sort of a comparative picture of the situation at East Devon, and she obviously speak for herself, but you know what I took from that sort of readout was actually, you know, one thing that distinguished us is that we weren't a quote unquote typical organisation or normal organisation in terms of complaining about the sorts of things that you might see in other organisations. So I think probably, you know, you can treat these results as very significant because they're coming from, you know, a body of staff who have been collectively very focused on the organisation, very proud and committed to be part of the organisation, and they're highlighting things that the organisation, you know, needs to understand and needs to address. So so certainly I would say that. I mean, the issue around my recent sort of completed staff awareness seminars, I think if there was one thing that came out of it was impatience around the reward review, wanting to know what PricewaterhouseCoopers were going to come up with. And actually, I think, if I'm just honest with you, a fair bit of anger on the part of the Employers Association, you know, in terms of the pay rise that was negotiated for last year, the cost of living rise. So, you know, I mean, the theory goes that, you know, we in local government collectively, you negotiate for the financial year, and you start those negotiations in April, and you certainly would hope to conclude them promptly. As it was, I think the view amongst the staff is that the employers were particularly miserly, and we didn't actually reach an agreement until last month. We didn't reach an agreement till last month, albeit it's backdated. But I think that was 1.75%, I think. And I think staff see that in terms of inflation and what they're experiencing, as with other members of the public, obviously, but what they're experiencing in terms of energy bills, etc. And then you add on to that, you know, arguably the public sector generally, you know, has been the one to make the cuts, has been the one to make the sacrifices over the last, you know, 10, 12 years, I guess, post 2008, really. So I think that would be my sense about it, really.
Thank you for that, Mark. Jo, I've noticed you nodding your head along the way through that. Have you got anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think it's been covered, to be honest, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Cago. Fred, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I probably looking at the same page as what was referred to earlier by Councillor Hall, page 15. Well, page 22, 15 in the report. My concern, and this question is probably aimed at the Chief Executive, is looking at the negative issues raised, 3 or 4 boxes, the first 4 boxes, about, well, I think we can all read it and see what it says. What I would say to the Chief Executive, do we have a recruitment and retention policy or strategy, or business continuity? Because you know, only the other day I heard on the grapevine that we're possibly losing a senior manager. if that's the case, are we not sort of bringing on staff to sort of backfill, so we're not have this big gap of trying to recruit again? Because recruitment is really important in terms of keeping our staff, and so people come and go and leave organisations. I get that. I've done it myself, but when you've got an organisation such as ours, it's very important that we actually retain the staff and keep them in place. And if they're not happy and they're leaving, then there's got to be reasons why. And I value these type of reports and the investors in people. Once again, I've been victim of investors in people, so fully conversant with it. But I'm just cautious that, are we missing something here? Mark.
Mark, would you like to reassure Councillor Cahill?
I don't think we're missing anything, Councillor Cahill. I think what you see in terms of those 4 comments on page 22 of the agenda are a reflection of the real practical difficulties that we currently have. So, several of the council's teams have taken on considerably more work during the pandemic. Some of it as a result of government initiatives, in terms of implementing schemes to support the private sector and to support the public through the pandemic. Others have been a reflection of a change in demand because, people working from home more, sort of look at what improvements they think they can make to their property. So the volume of planning applications has increased exponentially, really. So, those issues which are potentially sort of demotivators in terms of why people might want to leave are then compounded by, the difficulties in the recruitment market fundamentally. So this comes back, to pay, but it also comes back to, are the skills out there in terms of the people we want to recruit? And I think probably one of the factors that was noticeable during the last 2 years, I would say, is that because of people not wanting to move or not wanting to relocate, actually your market, the pool of people that you could potentially recruit to has diminished quite considerably in scope, I think. I mean, there are some exceptions. I think we've still got a planning officer who lives in Edinburgh who's working remotely. But aside from that, I think my general observation would be that the recruitment, the geography of the recruitment market has diminished quite considerably because, for various and obvious reasons, relocation has not been a realistic proposition. Then you can add on the issue of house prices in the area and all those types of things, really. But I think that would be my broad assessment of it. In terms of your actual sort of initial question, do we have a recruitment and retention strategy? Yes, we do. And we have brought some previous reports to this committee highlighting changes and improvements that we want to make. But I noticed, Chair, that Jo has her hand up, so she might want to fill in with a bit more detail, perhaps.
That's lovely. I knew she'd come in the end. Jo, over to you.
Makes it change for me not to say so very much at this meeting. So I think there's a couple of things. One is around the recruitment markets, or picking up on what Mark has just said. I've been in HR for nearly 30 years now, and this is just unprecedented in terms of the challenges we've got being able to recruit at the current time. I think that's about sort of the levels of employment, but also I was reading something the other day around people leaving the market or not entering the market. So older people who perhaps have, made the decision to retire earlier than originally expected because of changing lifestyles and things, with maybe life choices with pandemic, and also younger workers as well. And we're definitely seeing that on the ground. We're having recruitment challenges across all roles, even sort of business admin apprenticeships, for example, where, that's been quite a successful market in the past. We can't get young people to come in and take those vacancies. That is an issue for us. And in terms of recruitment strategy, yes, we've got a range of actions. I've were detailed in the paper I brought to the first committee meeting that I joined last September, which are obviously the reward review and looking at work smart are the two, and that those are really the ones I've been sort of prioritising and working on since I joined. But we've got projects around our employer brand, so how we market ourselves as an employer, in the marketplace with, competing with other employers, and also our sort of what I'm calling our grow our own strategy around how we, bring people in and train them up, and also how we, widen our sources of talent. But as with, as seen in the survey here from other members of staff across the council, it's the same in HR. We've got a small team, demands are high, got a lot of operational work, particularly at the moment, part of which is obviously supporting managers with recruitment. And, that then does impact on our ability to move forward the sort of strategic project work that we want to do. But it is on my list, and I'm making best efforts to move those things forward. But I that it's unprecedented to be able to say that I can't guarantee that those things will work in the current market, and we'll have to, I think we have to try. But it is an unprecedented time, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Joe. Hopefully everybody's reassured.
Can I reply, Chair?
Briefly, if you could, Fred, please.
Yeah, well, I would just like to come back. Thanks very much for both your replies, but are we being proactive? I mean, I've just recently seen a recruitment fair with 40 employers at the Corn Exchange in Exeter advertised. Are we being proactive by going to those sort of fairs? Yeah. And yeah. What current vacancies are we holding at the moment?
I would need to go back and get the data. I mean, but obviously this was an extraordinary committee meeting today, but our next scheduled meeting in April will be bringing the vacancy data as part of our people data figures. So I'll have the updated information on that, and we'll be bringing that, to every sort of committee meeting going forward. So we'll start to see sort of the trends and where we are with that. Vacancy data, we hadn't held it historically in the system. It's quite difficult because it changes day by day, but we are now doing that because, for your benefit, obviously as an overview of what's happening workforce wise, but also for my benefit as HR manager to better understand where we are with vacancies, what the trends are, and turnover and those sorts of things as well. So,
and local recruitment fairs?
Yes, we're actually at the Corn Exchange today. We've got a stand at the recruitment fair. We've done some work. We've now got on the Armed Forces. We've got on their websites, and we're looking at other things as well. So I'm just sort of trying to do quick wins at the moment where we can, and then obviously as part of the bigger picture.
No, it's pleasing to see that we're being proactive. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Fred and Joe. And I think hopefully members are getting a flavour this morning of just how much work and how much additional communications now in place between officers and members through this committee. And hopefully you'll find it useful and come to future meetings in similar numbers as to this morning. I think that'd be excellent. Councillor Allen, Mike, sorry to keep you hanging on so long.
That's all right, Chair, thank you. Just to pick up on the area of recruitment, I mean, it's been labelled the great retirement, the great resignation. People are shifting around very badly, causing all sorts of ructions in the recruitment market. It's not unique to us by any means. But the one thing that I've been saying for many years is that we need succession planning, because so many of our working officers are in the older category. And we therefore, with this kind of overall trend, we need clearly to make sure that we're doing all we can to bring in fresh talent. And if we continue to want to grow our own, which I think is our policy, then direct connections and encouragement and talking to people in Collerton Grammar School, King's and Honiton are all part of making sure that the message gets through at the time when youngsters are making their decisions. Second thing is, in terms of the tables here, if you look on the first table, which I think is on page 8, then the one thing that calls out to me is, given that we've got so many people who are working remotely, the item, I am given supportive feedback on the work that I do, only around 44% don't seem too happy with that. And I think one of the keys to making sure that remote working works and the stress levels are appropriately managed is a supportive feedback. And I just want to encourage the Chief Executive to encourage the managers at all levels, as I'm sure a lot of them do, to give that supportive feedback. But it looks as if we might need a little bit more attention to that issue. Thank you for listening. Message ends.
Thank you, Mike. Joe, you were ready to reply straight away. Over to you.
Yeah, so on the first point around school and college engagement, that is definitely part of my plans for the Grow Our Own project. I've got a bit of a blueprint from my time at Devon County Council, which I led the apprenticeship arrangements amongst other things. So, you know, my plan is we do something on a similar scale here, albeit a bit smaller. And I've already made connections with the local secondary schools. But again, it's, you know, we need to get it right. We need to, you know, so things like work experience, I want it to be a really positive and good, you know, valuable experience for students and, you know, for our staff as well. So I'd rather take a bit of time and get it right rather than offering something that isn't quite there. So that yeah, it's definitely on the list. And in terms of supportive feedback, I'm sure Mark will pick up on this as well. But, you know, we've got a long established performance excellence review process, which appraisals and one-to-ones. We're just launching that again for this year, so there will be a lot of onus on that, and also the Work Smart work that we're doing, which I'll update committee on in April at next meeting in terms of progress. A lot of that is about getting feedback and engagement with staff and so on as well, and you know, all of that supported you know, through training and so on for managers who, you know, where required. So yeah, it's certainly all on our radar.
Thank you very much. Joe. Mark, did you want to comment on this element, please?
Well, only really, I guess, to agree with the comments that Councillor Allen has made. You know, it is the case. You've identified that in terms of our ageing workforce, and arguably maybe some of the old dogs have found it hard to learn new tricks as to, you know, the ways to work effectively during the pandemic. And I think that's reflected in the line that you've highlighted there, in terms of, you know, there should certainly be more managers giving feedback either often or always than on the sometimes part of that bar, isn't there really? So, but we are aware of it, and I think you know, well, for example, we have an away day for SMT Plus next week, where the issue of the Work Smart policy and how we take that forward is going to be an integral part of this, because, you know, you will know as well as, if not better than I, that for so many people, you know, time sat at the desk is the main measure of productivity, but actually that's not a very good measure of productivity, is it? So, you know, the pandemic has actually been an excellent opportunity to sort of say, you know, you need to focus on what you want, you know, what are the outcomes, what are the outputs you need? That's how you should be measuring, really. And what actions do you need to take, particularly in terms of feedback, to sort of generate that as sort of a virtuous cycle, really.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to thank everybody for their contribution on this subject. I've just got Councillor Ian Hall showing, so if everybody's comfortable with that, we'll hear from Councillor Hall and then close off this item and move on to the next piece. Councillor Hall. Ian.
Thank you very much. Continuous improvement is quite difficult when individuals and organisations have been suppressed over the last couple of years. But what I'm trying to do is look from the lens, what would make East Devon District Council become more of an attractive career path, especially with our young people. Whatever normal working is now, I don't know what it's going to be going forward in the future. But we all would agree that work is not just about money. In this instance, it's about helping East Devon and the individuals thrive. But working from home, we are going through what I would say is a forced transition. But people working from home for long periods of time could possibly feel very isolated and possibly lonely. And therefore, their confidence as individuals will be impacted. At some point, where we have Blackdown House, we need to, obviously, we do have the pandemic still to consider here, but we need to be breathing the same air and encouraging brainstorming and passing on experience, because we are going to be in a very difficult position of brain drain. It's not like we can stick a USB lead in the back of everyone's head and download that information. But really, the confidence of the individuals and the wider teams is absolutely an area that I feel we need to dig a little bit deeper to actually really, really know how the individuals are. I know that we at East Devon are touching base with those working from home on, if not a weekly basis, but getting to see people, even if it is in a public open space, to actually really gauge how they are actually doing, because we are all online. I've seen people in my work day paid job, some people thrive over the last 2 years, and I've seen other people shrink and their confidence being impacted considerably. So I'm sure that Joe and Mark and everybody in the senior SMT are looking at this, but I really do feel that we need to be getting people to breathe the same air as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'm not actually sure about the advice of breathing the same air at present, but I know exactly what you mean. Otherwise than that was very helpful. Thank you. Mark or Joe, would you like to make a closing comment, please, before we finish this item?
I fully acknowledge what Councillor Hall's mentioned. I think what I would say is that, you know, one thing that's come out from the survey and from general conversations with staff is actually flexibility is a key draw for people, I think now more so than it perhaps was 2 years ago. So the employer being sufficiently, you know, fleet of foot or flexible to recognise that, you can't just adopt a one size fits all approach. You know, try and accommodate people's individual needs around making sure they can fit work in, as much as it needs to meet the needs of the customer, but it also needs to meet their needs too. I think the more we can do that, I think the more we're on the right track. And if I compare our approach with other councils in the Southwest, I think we have been, considerably more enlightened to date than some others. And the example I like to give is Selina, who you may know from the planning team. I think it's either her mother-in-law or something, works for Torridge District Council, and she was outraged when the edict went out that they all had to get back to the office the moment that the requirement to work from home was relaxed, and apparently they're all sort of up there in Bideford chuntering away saying, "Oh, if only we worked for East Devon, wouldn't life be better?" So there we go. There's a thing to mull over.
Thanks
but
for that,
it's a long way from Bideford to Honiton, unfortunately.
I was going to ask whether you had their names. You could be contacting them, but do we do that sort of thing? Anyway, but no, thank you everybody for contributions to that review of that report, and thank you to Mark and the officers for producing it in the first place. I hope we agree it's very valuable and actually showing signs of improvement over the concern, at least, that was expressed last year. So it's a step forward. What I'd like to do is propose from the chair the recommendation as put on page 3 of this report, and also with the addition, of course, of the additional recommendation from Councillor Lawrence and Councillor De Sarum relating to supporting or endorsing our approach to renew our IIP accreditation. So all those please in favour of that, could you please use your green tick, and anybody opposed, the red cross.
Okay, Chair, you have 10 members in favour of the recommendation and no one objecting.
Thank you very much. I should have directed that, of course, to committee members only, but in the vote. But the enthusiasm, I don't think anybody would argue with the outcome. Thank you very much. That brings the public section of our meeting to a close. So I'd like to thank any members of the public who've been watching us online. However, could I remind all those present that supporting officer will confirm when our meeting is no longer being recorded or going live before we continue in private session. So can we please wait to hear